In Tampa, did y'all watch their convention? I did. In Tampa, the Republican argument against the president re-election was actually pretty simple, pretty snappy. It went something like this. We left him a total mess. He hadn't cleaned it up fast enough, so fire him and put us back in. Now, but they did it well. They looked good, they sounded good. They convinced me that they all loved their families and their children and were grateful they'd been born in America and all. Really, I'm not being, they did. And this is important. They convinced me they were honorable people who believe what they've said and they're going to keep every commitment they've made. We just got to make sure the American people know what those commitments are. Because in order to look like an acceptable, reasonable, moderate alternative to President Obama, they just didn't say very much about the ideas they've offered over the last 2 years. They couldn't. Because they want to go back to the same old policies that got us in trouble in the first place. They want to cut taxes for high-income Americans even more than President Bush did. They want to get rid of those pesky financial regulations designed to prevent another crash and prohibit future bailouts. They want to actually increase defense spending over a decade, $2 trillion more than the Pentagon has requested, without saying what they'll spend it on. And they want to make enormous cuts in the rest of the budget, especially programs that help the middle class and poor children. As another president once said, there they go again. Now, I like the argument for President Obama's re-election a lot better. Here it is. He inherited a deeply damaged economy. He put a floor under the crash. He began the long, hard road to recovery and laid the foundation for a modern, more well-balanced economy that will produce millions of good new jobs, vibrant new businesses, and lots of new wealth for innovators. Now, are we where we want to be today? No. Is the president satisfied? Of course not. But are we better off than we were when he took office? Listen to this. Listen to this. Everybody's forgotten. Everybody's forgotten. When President Barack Obama took office, the economy was in free fall. It had just shrunk 9% of GDP. We were losing 750,000 jobs a month. Are we doing better than that today? The answer is yes. Now look, here's the challenge he faces and the challenge all of you who support him face. I get it. I know it. I've been there. A lot of Americans are still angry and frustrated about this economy. If you look at the numbers, you know employment is growing, banks are beginning to lend again. In a lot of places, housing prices are even beginning to pick up. But too many people do not feel it yet. I had the same thing happen in 1994 and early 95. We could see that the policies were working, that the economy was growing, but most people didn't feel it yet. Thankfully, by 1996, the economy was roaring, everybody felt it, and we were halfway through the longest peacetime expansion in the history of the United States. But, wait. The difference this time is purely in the circumstances. President Obama started with a much weaker economy than I did. Listen to me now. No president, not me, not any of my predecessors, No one could have fully repaired all the damage that he found in just 4 years. Now, but he has laid the foundations for a new, modern, successful economy of shared prosperity. And if you will renew the president's contract, you will feel it. You will feel it. Folks, whether the American people believe what I just said or not may be the whole election. I just want you to know that I believe it. With all my heart, I believe it. Now, why do I believe it? I'm fixing to tell you why. I believe it because President Obama's approach embodies the values, the ideas, and the direction America has to take to build the 21st century version of the American dream, a nation of shared opportunities, shared responsibilities, shared prosperity, a shared sense of community. So let's get back to the story. In 2010, as the president's recovery program kicked in, the job losses stopped and things began to turn around. The Recovery Act saved or created millions of jobs and cut taxes, let me say this again, cut taxes for 95% of the American people. In the last 29 months, our economy has produced about 4.5 million private sector jobs. We could have done better, but last year the Republicans blocked the president's job plan, costing the economy more than 1 million new jobs. So here's another job score. President Obama plus 4.5 million. Congressional Republicans, 0. During this period, more than 500,000 manufacturing jobs have been created under President Obama. That's the first time manufacturing jobs have increased since the 1990s. And I'll tell you something else. The auto industry restructuring worked. It saved more than 1 million jobs, and not just at GM, Chrysler, and their dealerships, but in auto parts manufacturing all over the country. That's why even the automakers who weren't part of the deal supported it. They needed to save those parts suppliers too. Like I said, we're all in this together. So what's happened? There are now 250,000 more people working in the auto industry than on the day the companies were restructured. So, now, we all know that Governor Romney opposed the plan to save GM and Chrysler. So, here's another job score. Are you listening in Michigan and Ohio and across the country? Here's another job score. Obama, 250,000. Romney, 0. Now, the agreement the administration made with the management, labor, and environmental groups to double car mileage, that was a good deal too. It will cut your gas prices in half, your gas bill. No matter what the price is, if you double the mileage of your car, your bill will be half what it would have been. It will make us more energy independent. It will cut greenhouse gas emissions. And according to several analyses over the next 20 years, it'll bring us another 500,000 good new jobs into the American economy. The president's energy strategy, which he calls all of the above, is helping too. The boom in oil and gas production, combined with greater energy efficiency, has driven oil imports to a near 20-year low and natural gas production to an all-time high. And renewable energy production has doubled. Of course, we need a lot more new jobs, but there are already more than 3 million jobs open and unfilled in America, mostly because the people who apply for them don't yet have the required skills to do them. The President and his Education Secretary have supported community colleges and employers in working together to train people for jobs that are actually open in their communities. And even more important, after a decade in which exploding college costs have increased the dropout rate so much that the percentage of our young people with 4-year college degrees has gone down so much that we have dropped to 16th in the world in the percentage of young people with college degrees. So, the President's student loan reform is more important than ever. Here's what it does. Here's what it does. You need to tell every voter where you live about this. It lowers the cost of federal student loans, and even more important, it gives students the right to repay those loans as a clear, fixed, low percentage of their income for up to 20 years. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean? Think of it. It means no one will ever have to drop out of college again for fear they can't repay their debt. And it means that if someone wants to take a job with a modest income, a teacher, a police officer, if they want to be a small town doctor in a little rural area, they won't have to turn those jobs down because they don't pay enough to repay the debt. Their debt obligation will be determined by their salary. This will change the future for young Americans. I don't know about you, but on all these issues, I know we're better off because President Obama made the decisions he did. Now, that brings me to health care. And the Republicans call it derisively Obamacare. They say it's a government takeover, a disaster, and that if we'll just elect them, they'll repeal it. Well, are they right? Let's take a look at what's actually happened so far. First, individuals and businesses have already gotten more than $1 billion in refunds from insurance companies because the new law requires 80 to 85% of your premium to go to your health care, not profits or promotion. And the gains are even greater than that because a bunch of insurance companies have applied to lower their rates to comply with the requirement. Second, more than 3 million young people between 19 and 25 are insured for the first time because their parents' policies can cover them. Third, millions of seniors are receiving preventive care, all the way from breast cancer screenings to tests for heart problems and scores of other things, and younger people are getting them too. Fourth, soon the insurance companies, not the government, the insurance companies will have millions of new customers, many of them middle-class people with pre-existing conditions who never could get insurance before. Now, finally, listen to this. For the last 2 years, after going up at 3 times the rate of inflation for a decade, for the last 2 years, health care costs have been under 4% in both years for the first time in 50 years. So, Are we better off because President Obama fought for health care reform? You bet we are. Now, there were two other attacks on the president in Tampa I think deserve an answer. First, both Governor Romney and Congressman Ryan attacked the president for allegedly robbing Medicare of $716 billion. That's the same attack they leveled against the Congress in 2010. And they got a lot of votes on it. But it's not true. Look, here's what really happened. You be the judge. Here's what really happened. There were no cuts to benefits at all. None. What the president did was to save money by taking the recommendations of a commission of professionals to cut unwarranted subsidies to providers and insurance companies that were not making people healthier and were not necessary to get the providers to provide the service. And instead of raiding Medicare, he used the savings to close the donut hole in the Medicare drug program. And you all got to listen carefully to this. This is really important. And to add 8 years to the life of the Medicare Trust Fund so it is solvent till 2024. So President Obama and the Democrats didn't weaken Medicare, they strengthened Medicare. Now, when Congressman Ryan looked into that TV camera and attacked President Obama's Medicare savings as, quote, the biggest, coldest power play, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because that $716 billion is exactly to the dollar the same amount of Medicare savings that he has in his own budget. You got to get one thing. It takes some brass to attack a guy for doing what you did. Now, you're having a good time, but this is getting serious. I want you to listen. It's important, because a lot of people believe this stuff. Now, at least on this issue, and this one issue, Governor Romney has been consistent. He attacked President Obama too, but he actually wants to repeal those savings and give the money back to the insurance company. He wants to go back to the old system, which means we'll reopen the donut hole and force seniors to pay more for drugs. And we'll reduce the life of the Medicare Trust Fund by 8 full years. So, if he's elected, and if he does what he promised to do, Medicare will now grow broke in 2016. Think about that. That means, after all, we won't have to wait until their voucher program kicks in 2023 to see the end of Medicare as we know it. They're going to do it to us sooner than we thought. Now, folks, this is serious because it gets worse. And you won't be laughing when I finish telling you this. They also want to block grant Medicaid and cut it by 1/3 over the coming 10 years. Of course, that's going to really hurt a lot of poor kids. But that's not all. A lot of folks don't know it, but nearly 2/3 of Medicaid is spent on nursing home care for Medicare seniors who are eligible for Medicaid. It's going to end Medicare as we know it. And a lot of that money is also spent to help people with disabilities, including a lot of middle-class families whose kids have Down syndrome or autism or other severe conditions. And honestly, just think about it. If that happens, I don't know what those families are going to do. So I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do everything I can to see that it doesn't happen. We can't let it happen. We can't. Now, wait a minute. Let's look at the other big charge the Republicans made. It's a real doozy. They actually have charged and run ads saying that President Obama wants to weaken the work requirements in the welfare reform bill I signed that moved millions of people from welfare to work. Wait, you need to know, here's what happened. Nobody ever tells you what really happened. Here's what happened. When some Republican governors asked if they could have waivers to try new ways to put people on welfare back to work, the Obama administration listened, because we all know it's hard for even people with good work histories to get jobs today, so moving folks from welfare to work is a real challenge. And the administration agreed to give waivers to those governors and others only if they had a credible plan to increase employment by 20%, and they could keep the waivers only if they did increase employment. Now, did I make myself clear? The requirement was for more work, not less. So, this is personal to me. We moved millions of people off welfare. It was one of the reasons that in the 8 years I was president, we had 100 times as many people move out of poverty into the middle class than happened under the previous 12 years. 100 times as many. It's a big deal. But I am telling you, the claim that President Obama weakened welfare reform's work requirement is just not true. But they keep on running ads claiming it. You want to know why? Their campaign poster said, "We are not going to let our campaign be dictated by fact checkers." Now, finally I can say that is true. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I hope you and every American within the sound of my voice remembers it every time they see one of those ads and it turns into an ad to re-elect Barack Obama and keep the fundamental principles of personal empowerment and moving everybody who can get a job into work as soon as we can. Now, let's talk about the debt. Today, interest rates are low, lower than the rate of inflation. People are practically paying us to borrow money, hold their money for them. But it will become a big problem when the economy grows and interest rates start to rise. We've got to deal with this big long-term debt problem, or it will deal with us. It'll gobble up a bigger and bigger percentage of the federal budget we'd rather spend on education and health care and science and technology. We got to deal with it. Now, what has the president done? He has offered a reasonable plan of $4 trillion in debt reduction over a decade, with $2.5 trillion coming from, for every $2.5 trillion in spending cuts, he raises $1 in new revenues, 2.5 to 1. And he has tight controls on future spending. That's the kind of balanced approach proposed by the Simpson-Bowles Commission, a bipartisan commission. Now, I think this plan is way better than Governor Romney's plan. First, the Romney plan fails the first test of fiscal responsibility. The numbers just don't add up. I mean, consider this. What would you do if you had this problem? Somebody says, oh, we got a big debt problem, we got to reduce the debt. So what's the first thing he says we're going to do? Well, to reduce the debt, we're going to have another $5 trillion in tax cuts, heavily weighted to upper income people. So we'll make the debt hole bigger before we start to get out of it. Now, when you say, what are you going to do about this $5 trillion you just added on? They say, oh, we'll make it up by eliminating loopholes in the tax code. So then you ask, well, which loopholes and how much? You know what they say? See me about that after the election. I'm not making it up. That's their position. See me about that after the election. Now, people ask me all the time how we got 4 surplus budgets in a row. What new ideas did we bring to Washington? I always give a one-word answer: arithmetic.